So, greetings and salutations, dear viewer. Omar Moore here on night number two of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago at the United Center. So, night number two is in the books. Look, this convention is speeding by. We are halfway home. And I got to just say, night number two for me lacked a little bit of punch compared to night number one. Is it possible at all for night number two to have better speeches, yet be not nearly as good or quite as good as night number one? It's entirely possible. And I felt that that's what happened. I thought night number one had so much emotion, so much intensity, so much feeling. It was so palpable that it would be really difficult to top night number one. Night number two, I think by definition, would be maybe it's a little bit harsh to say a letdown. Yeah, it's a little bit rough. But I do think that night number two was not quite as good as night number one. Now, there was that roll call I thought was fantastic. That roll call, really inventive, really clever. Loved it. It was very creative, is more the term I really want to use. I thought that that was energetic and galvanizing, and it was much, much more exciting to watch that than the roll calls we usually see at conventions that are just drawn out, very dry, very robotic, very academic, no pizzazz. And so you have to hold people's attention. And for nearly an hour, but it's about an hour, that roll call went last night. And I thought it was really good. It was really, really good. And so that roll call was very well done, even though we'd known for 2 weeks that the roll call had already been done, a virtual roll call, and Vice President Harris had already been officially the Democratic nominee. Now, on Thursday, she will officially accept, becoming the first Black woman to accept a major party's nomination for President of the United States in a very her story making fashion. I look forward to that on Thursday. But Tuesday night, for me, lacked a little something. I thought that the Obamas obviously were excellent with their speeches. I think the speech of the night was from Michelle Obama, who really was very, very good. Her husband was good as well, but I thought Michelle Obama, not that there's a competition between the two of them, Michelle Obama absolutely was brilliant with what she had to say. Very keen themes that were clear and relatable and really hit the room and beyond the room. What she said, it went beyond that room to every place. And that's what Michelle Obama brings you. She has a very universal quality about her, an ability to be really direct and plain spoken and honest, and yet, very encapsulate everybody in that human experience that she's talking about. And that's what makes her an especially persuasive speaker. And so I don't think she gets nearly as much credit for her oratory skills as her husband does for his. And nonetheless, I think they're very comparable as speakers in terms of the themes they convey in the very clear ways that they convey them. And so I thought Michelle Obama was brilliant on night number two. I thought Doug Emhoff was also quite good. Not quite as good, obviously, not nearly as good as Michelle Obama or Barack Obama, but Doug Emhoff was able to convey his intimate story of family and his intimate story of the way he fell in love with the vice president of the United States and how they really did fall in love with each other and their family and the whole concept of a blended family, as it's called these days. I love the way that that video helped frame Doug Emhoff and then how he then presented his own story in that convention room. And it was a very intimate speech, actually. And yet, to such a big hall like that, such speeches of such intimacy can get lost, can get completely swallowed up by that space. But I think that Doug Emhoff used that space wisely. And because he kind of was fairly soft spoken, it forced you to listen even more to the speech. And he wasn't quiet, but he doesn't have that commanding voice, at least when he speaks. And so when he was speaking about Vice President Harris, his wife, you could feel how that mattered to him. You could see it. And so he seemed to speak quieter because I guess the words were even more dear to him. What he was saying was obviously more dear and true to him. So I thought his speech was effective as well. But really, it was a night for the Obamas. The Obamas were the key in otherwise, other than their speeches and Emhoff's speech and the roll call, to me, it was not a night of particular remembrance. There were some other speakers. You had Angela Also Brooks, who, of course, is running for Senate in Maryland. You had a number of other speakers, but many of them, to me, fell by the wayside. I did not really think very highly of the American Express CEO or one-time CEO or maybe current CEO Kenneth Chenault. I just didn't think his speech belonged there. There's some speeches that just don't belong at conventions, and maybe Vice President Harris knows him personally or something. Maybe he's donated lots of money. I don't really don't know, but and then again, I plead ignorance to this, so I will readily admit that. But I just didn't think Ken Chenault's speech really belonged at that convention. Yeah, there were some Republicans there. They said their bit quickly and moved on, which I'm glad that they did not spend more than a minute at that microphone. And really, when you've got Republicans who want to vote for Kamala Harris coming in, I think it's good. Get him on, get him off. It doesn't have to be this massive speech. And so Stephanie Grisham was one of the speakers. She was there for about 100 seconds and she was gone. There was another speaker who was there for a real brief time. And I thought that worked actually when you just move those speakers along. Um, but Chenault spoke for about 10 minutes. Bernie Sanders spoke for about 10 minutes. And I just didn't, Bernie's speech for the most part didn't land for me. I mean, the last couple of minutes of it did, but, it was a very typically wooden Bernie Sanders. And I'm saying this as someone who used to be a big, big fan of his, but, there's something, he looked different tonight. I just think it was maybe because he's just like we're all getting older. Um, but for me, I didn't see that speech at all really hitting anything except for the last minute or two that I thought was effective. And so that's really how the night went. It was just after the strength of Monday night, second night was always going to be a tough one, tough act to follow what we saw on Monday night. So kind of the sophomore jinx for day number two and night number two. We'll see, of course, what night number three brings us. I'm Omar Moore. Don't forget to listen to the Politicrat daily podcast on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, Odyssey, Audible, and numerous other podcasting platforms, including Good Pods. And of course, you can, don't forget, also find me on social media on X at the popcorn REEL on Spoutable, spoutable.com/popcorn REEL on Threads, threads.net/popcorn REEL, and of course Blue Sky. Blue Sky is popcornreel.bsky.social.